We have some breaking news to discuss today as more and more reports are starting to surface regarding the Miami Heat targeting a specific player, and this player could be heading to Miami as reports are indicating that the Heat are heavily pursuing Bruce Brown of the Toronto Raptors. So we're going to break down that report in this episode and discuss what a potential trade package could look like. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We notice a large percentage of you who are watching right now are not subscribed, about 97.5%. So if you aren't already, make sure to scroll down and hit that button. It would mean the world to me and Houston. Without further ado, let's get right into the video today. We have a lot to get into. So obviously, Miami Heat made a big trade a few days ago, acquiring Terry Rozier from the Charlotte Hornets, and the Heat have not been playing well at all since that trade. They haven't been playing well before that trade. A brutal loss against the Celtics, a brutal loss before, I believe it was against Miami, and things are looking a bit bleak in Heat Nation, Heat world. However, they aren't done yet. The trade deadline is not over. Obviously, their big splash of Terry Rozier is probably going to be the biggest name that they end up trading for this trade deadline. But more and more reports are starting to surface regarding the Miami Heat targeting a Toronto Raptor who is a NBA champion, and that is Bruce Brown. So let's just get right into the topics and let's just discuss it. So this came out a few days ago and is the Heat, quote, believed to be interested in $45 million NBA champion Bruce Brown. It basically goes on to say, now I want to point this out. Now this was made on January 22nd, the report, before the Kyle Lowry trade to the Charlotte Hornets. So it says the Heat are believed to be interested in Bruce Brown. That's the big part here. And it says given there's a Lowry thing, a Lowry trade could work, but that's obviously not going to happen because Lowry is no longer with the Heat. But the biggest thing is, as of 4 days ago, the Heat are interested in guard Bruce Brown. And then when you're looking at some potential trade packages, the Raptors acquire Brown from the Indiana Pacers in exchange for Siakam. And obviously, the Toronto Raptors have signaled, especially as of late, that they do want to trade Bruce Brown. And Mark Stein reported that the Raptors want a good bit for Bruce Brown. Before we get into the actual package of what they could potentially want for Bruce Brown, let's just discuss how he could fit potentially into this team. Now, he is interesting. He can play the 1, he can play the 2, he can play the 3. He signed that big 2-year, $45 million deal with the Pacers following him winning a championship last season with the Denver Nuggets. And he is a very, very good player. There's no doubt about that. He's a two-way guard. He can rebound, one of the better rebounding guards in the league. And when you're looking at what the Miami Heat potentially need or potentially want on this team, Bruce Brown could be a very good fit. We discussed in yesterday's video, obviously, P.J. Tucker's a name that's come up. Bruce Brown being an upgrade over that. Dorian Finney-Smith, I would rather Bruce Brown. Obviously, Dorian Finney-Smith is much bigger. They kind of fill different roles to a degree. But when you're looking at some potential role players that could be coming to the Miami Heat, I think Bruce Brown is a fairly interesting guy to consider, especially if they're trying to move Caleb Martin, which they're absolutely, supposedly, trying to do. And again, you're looking at his stats here. He's a very, very efficient player. He can shoot the 3. Essentially, he's a 3-and-D shooting guard who can play the small forward. He's not super big, but he could kind of be that backup guard for Terry Rozier. He could kind of be the backup, basically what Caleb Martin's role is in a heightened degree, and they're obviously not going to be able to retain Caleb Martin because of the salary. And then this year with Bruce Brown, there's a player option next year, or a team option, or maybe it's a mutual option for another $20 million. So you'd be able to retain the asset if you want to, but obviously it's going to be an interesting conversation to have going forward if they end up acquiring Bruce Brown, because at this point, they made their big splash. The Miami Heat traded for Terry Rozier. Hasn't really worked out yet. It's too early to officially tell and officially say whether or not that was a good or bad trade. But what we can say is that based off of what we're seeing from the Miami Heat right now, they can't be done. They have to make another move, and whether that's in the form of, I don't know, Bruce Brown, Dorian Finney-Smith, any of these guys, it's going to be hard to tell what kind of move they can make because they're not going to go out. I mean, they still have most of their assets, and that was the benefit from making a big trade, or a trade for a big-name player like Terry Rozier, but not having to give up too much, only giving up 1 pick in Kyle Lowry, is that they have assets to potentially go out for another guy, but I don't know if that guy is out there on the market, whether that is, again, Dorian Finney-Smith or Bruce Brown. You need kind of guys who can elevate your floor a little bit, and that is exactly what Bruce Brown could potentially bring to the table, because it is no secret that the Toronto Raptors want to get rid of him. They're obviously in a complete rebuild, and they can get any assets they get. Now, let's discuss what it could potentially, what a trade could look like regarding Bruce Brown. So the Raptors' asking price, teams acquiring Bruce Brown, has been described as a future first and a quality player at a minimum, because Toronto knows that a variety of contending teams are interested in Brown, noting his contributions to Denver's title run last season, making the Raptors hopeful they can spark some kind of robust bidding for a player with a championship degree. Now, makes tons of sense. And then Mark Stein kind of doubled up on this report, saying the Raptors are seeking a first and a young player. So when you're thinking of that now from the Heat, they obviously just gave up a first for Terry Rozier. So if they give up one of their other firsts and then I mean, I guess a young player would constitute as Nikola Jovic. Would it? So like a first round pick in Nikola Jovic for Bruce Brown seems very expensive considering the fact that you got Terry Rozier for just one first round pick. And now if you're using this Terry Rozier trade as any sort of baseline going forward, it's going to be very hard to beat that in value. So a lot of Heat fans might think that any trade they make going forward is going to be not fair to a degree, because again, I don't know if Bruce Brown is worth Jovic and a first. If they think that they can, if Bruce Brown puts them over the top, he's a very good player and he has championship pedigree. I mean, he fits right into the Heat culture. Then that would be a very interesting conversation to have. But the thing with Bruce Brown, and I don't know, there's a lot more teams that are willing to go out and get Bruce Brown compared to, I think, Terry Rozier, just because of how easily Bruce Brown would fit. He fits in any team. You look at Philly, you look at the Lakers, any team that is trying to make a deep postseason run. If you add a 3-and-D efficient wing who's great at rebounding, can facilitate a little bit, guard 1 through 3 maybe, 1 through 4 occasionally, not really, but then every single team that is trying to contend is going to be going for him, as opposed to Terry Rozier is more of a scorer and doesn't defend at a super high level. So it's going to be very interesting to see. But I want to ask you in the comments, would you do a Bruce Brown swap for Nikola Jovic and a first-round pick? Or I can ask you this as well, would you do just Nikola Jovic for Bruce Brown straight up? You're getting a guy who can help you this season in Bruce Brown in exchange for Nikola Jovic, who, albeit is a very promising prospect, a high ceiling prospect, is not going to help you this season as much, especially in the postseason when compared to a guy like Bruce Brown, who if you slide into that lineup, whether he starts, he's probably going to be coming off the bench as the 6th man, the 7th man, especially because they're not going to be able to retain Caleb Martin. So maybe you trade for Bruce Brown, you give up a pick or whatever it is, and then you trade Caleb Martin and a second or something to get another depth piece, or maybe you try to trade Caleb Martin to another contending team to try to recoup some of your assets, and then you're swapping a guy that you can't retain because of the salary in Caleb Martin in exchange for a guy who you have under control for this year and the next year on an option in Bruce Brown. So it's going to be very interesting to see, but again, it's like a lot of teams are going for Bruce Brown. You can see here, obviously the Raptors, first round picking a young player, which makes sense. And the Lakers in this situation, if you're competing and bidding against the Lakers, they would give up a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino or Max Christie and a first. And if you're thinking about the Lakers, if there's no other move they can make, and if they strike out on DeJounte Murray, or maybe they don't strike out on DeJounte Murray, they get him and they want to add another piece, a Bruce Brown trade to the Lakers seems pretty likely, especially because LeBron, we know how these LeBron-run teams operate. They want to get the most out of the short kind of run they have. And I suspect LeBron would push very hard for a guy like Bruce Brown, who's coming off of a championship, great postseason run with Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. But that'll wrap it up. Let me know in the comments, would you be interested in Bruce Brown? Do you think he would put the Heat over the top in a time where they are struggling right now? And would you do Nikola Jovic in a first, or even maybe Nikola Jovic in a second for Bruce Brown of the Toronto Raptors? But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you tomorrow.